Retro.
Hey, this is Catherine Tabor, Senator Padme Amidala from Star Wars The Clone Wars, and you're listening to Jay and Dennis on Podcast Stardust. Stay on the light side.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krubs.
And we're starting this week off with another Clone Wars discussion, more specifically looking at episode 21 of season 1. But before we get into that discussion, Jay, you want to remind everybody where we can be found around the internet?
Absolutely. We are on Facebook and Instagram very conveniently at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the dish is aligned, the signal is boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, the bridge is up, and we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So this is our discussion of, again, Lyberty on Ryloth, which is episode 21 of season 1, and it is the final episode of the Ryloth trilogy of episodes. Jay, you want to go ahead and give us the summary for this one?
Sure thing. The invasion of the Separatists-held world of Ryloth continues. The Republic forces take heavy losses as they close in on the capital. Mace Windu seeks out Cham Syndulla and his band of freedom fighters on Ryloth for assistance. Despite some initial mistrust, Syndulla agrees to aid the assault on the capital after Senator Orn Free Taa promises that the Republic will not occupy the planet after its liberation.
That's right. And then they are victorious, and Wat Tambor is captured. So, like I said, this is the final episode of this little trilogy that we've got going on. What do you think about this one overall?
Oh, it's just so wonderful. I just love the entire Ryloth arc. And I know that they've been fighting for Ryloth for like ever at this point. But there's, as I said last week, there's just so many foundational things that happen in this arc. And of course, we get to meet Cham Syndulla, which obviously has so many far-reaching, types of things going on between his family and successors and whatnot. But I mean, just the fact that we get Mace in this episode and the focus on him, which is really cool. And it's just such a great episode all around. And I'm so happy that we get back into these. I say it all the time, but it's funny because somebody else had just, quick aside, had just put this on about they were doing a Clone Wars rewatch recently as well. And even though everything happened 15 years ago, and I'm sure at the time it was in my brain pan and in my memory, and there are definitely some things that stick out, it's like watching it for the first time every time we watch these, which is so fun. So anyway, there you go.
Yeah, and the other thing is, like, the more Star Wars content we get, the more fun it is to go back and see these things and see how Clone Wars was both influenced by the movies that came before it, and then how it influenced the projects that came after it.
Oh, yeah.
And this episode has plenty of that. We'll touch on some of it as we get through this discussion. And I'm with you. This is such a great little arc of the Clone Wars, and that's one of the things the Clone Wars does so well, is that you'll get episodes that are standalones, and they're fantastic episodes, and they tell a good story. They have a great theme, plenty of action, whatever. But then every once in a while, you get these little trilogies of episodes, sometimes 4 episodes that work together to tell a story. And then, back in the day, Lucasfilm would do something like string them all together and put them together as a watching party in movie theaters for a limited time or something like that. Yeah, and those always fun events when that type of thing happened on this. But you're right. This is a Mace Windu has shown up in the Clone Wars prior to this, but this is the first episode that he is really featured in. And of course, it's not Samuel Jackson doing the voice. I believe it's Phil Lamar, if I got that right. But he takes on the lead role in all of this and really stars in it, which is pretty cool. Because for one, Mace Windu is, we're told that he is one of the most powerful Jedi in the Order, but other than, that's not demonstrated at all in the Phantom Menace. We get to see him do some stuff in the arena on Geonosis, and then it's a short battle with Palpatine in Revenge of the Sith. But he really gets to show what he's capable of here in this
Oh, yeah.
episode.
Oh, he sure does, and it's very Gendy Tartakovsky-esque in that
Hmm.
way, very almost over the top, but still very believable from a Jedi perspective kind of thing,
Right.
as far as, like, force abilities and things go, but, I mean, you do definitely. I mean, Mace Windu is always larger than life, and he definitely proves that here, that's for sure.
Yeah, and one of the things I really appreciated about the episode guide over on StarWars.com is that they confirmed at the beginning of this episode they paid an homage to Legends, and that is when the ATE that's in the lead gets the legs blown out from underneath it by the AATs, the Separatist droid tanks. He goes up to the cockpit, so to speak, and breaks the glass with the Force to save the clone that was driving the tank. Well, that was his Shatterpoint technique, which was a big
Oh,
deal for
right.
him from Legends. It's not
Uh-huh.
just him applying the Force; it was deliberate him using the Shatterpoint thing. And I mean, I was aware of the Shatterpoint technique, but I didn't necessarily think that you had to have that ability in order to break the glass or anything. Anyone could like maybe use a Force push or something, but no, that was a very deliberate thing that they did there because originally they were going to have him break the window with a lightsaber, but they saw the opportunity to make that reference, so they took it.
Oh, that's brilliant. I
Yeah.
love when they do that kinda stuff. It's
Me
awesome.
too. Me too. Well, again, we talk about this all the time. It's being aware of the things that came before, whether they're canon or not.
Sure.
There's always a bit of truth in legends, and the legends stuff that we may not get those stories imported in full, but we get elements of them that seep into canon, and that is always a great acknowledgement. I mean, it was painful at the
Oh,
time
yeah.
when we lost legends, but now getting this type of stuff showing up is pretty cool. And we hadn't actually lost legends when this happened. So, anyways, there's
No,
that.
not yet. But
Yeah.
but to your point, I mean, it's very validating as a fan to see
Uh-huh.
those kinds of things represented.
Very much so. But that
Mhm.
entire opening scene, where you got the ATTEs all in a row, winding around this very narrow path on the side of a
Yeah.
mountain, and they're getting pinned down by the droid tanks. And okay, for one, the droids actually did something intelligent here. They took out the lead tank to bring the entire column to a whole standstill, and then just a B1 battle droid gives the order to then take out the final tank so they can't retreat. And once they got them
Mhm.
boxed in, they'll just blast them all to pieces. I'm not used to battle droids being that smart. It was kind of refreshing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and to think that they are free thinkers too, as they point
Mhm.
out later on in the episode.
Yes, I'm glad you brought that up because they find the remains of one of the battle droids, and I don't even remember what the droid's number was, and it's not important. But they hold up the head, and one of the droids makes a comment. It's like, "Oh yeah, he was one of the older generations where, he couldn't even think for himself. He had all of his programming from a central computer, and like not like us, we're free thinkers." And they all like repeat the same, right?
Roger,
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 Roger.
roger, roger. I know, I was cracking up. That
Yeah,
was so good.
yeah.
But, getting back to Mace with the ATTEs, and he throws that one, off the cliff, all
Hmm.
I could think of was, when Grievous was getting reprimanded for wasting all those battle droids and everything, like, I wonder what the Republic thinks of Mace Windu just throwing this huge ATT off this cliff.
At least it had the advantage of already being broken
This is
in that
true.
guard, and he had to do it so that they could continue their assault. Uh,
Right.
but uh, but yeah, no, I hear you there. I mean, he just demonstrates power time and again
Oh, yeah,
in this episode.
for
And not
sure.
to mention, he calls on the clones. I think he called it was Lightning Squadron
Uh-huh,
to
uh-huh.
get the ATRTs, the little two-legged walkers, the predecessors to the ATST, so that they could make that quick charge on the tanks and destroy those droids to relieve the convoy from the bombardment that they were undergoing.
Yeah, and those things are super cool. I mean, they were just like, hurtling themselves over top of debris and just zipping back and forth left and right and zigging and zagging. And I thought to myself, okay, there's got to be more than just joysticks that they're using to steer these things. You almost wonder if they were not really attached to their nerves, but if it was something that was stimulated by their own nervous system to be able to react so fast. And if that's the case, that's awesome.
That'd be cool. I kind of doubt it simply because later in this episode, one of the clones, Stack, he becomes enamored by the blurrg. So I want to talk about
Hmm.
a reference here, and it's essentially the equivalent of being one of the ATRTs.
Hmm.
For
Hmm.
him, um, I know that's not really a convincing argument, but at any rate, the idea is that he can ride an ATRT with a little more patience. He can ride a blurrg, which is supposed to be faster
Right.
than the ATRTs, which is kind of funny because the blurgs are stubby looking little things.
They are, but they're fast. They are
Yeah.
fast.
And of course, we see the blurg again in The Mandalorian.
Right.
Keel has those.
Exactly.
But do you know where the blurg originated from?
I know we talked about this just recently, and my mind it just went blank as soon as you asked me that. So you're going to tell me though.
Yeah, in the old Legends Star Wars movie, Battle for Endor, which is the sequel to
That's
Caravan
it.
of Courage. Yeah.
Okay. Yep. That's it.
But these things get around. They're on Endor, they're on Ryloth, and then they're on whatever the name of the planet that Queel lived on as well.
Uh
Kind of like Jawas spreading across the galaxy, I
huh.
suppose.
There you go. They're useful little critters.
Indeed, they are. But the other thing that's huge in this episode, or one of the other things that's huge for anyway, is the introduction of Cham Syndulla.
Yes.
And he's a character that we will see again, most notably in Rebels. And he's perhaps even more famous for being Hera's father
Hmm.
here. So, what do you think about Cham?
It was so great to see him, because of course we have all this history now. And as you just said, he is Harrison Dulla's father, and
Mhm.
we have that whole history. But, as far as this a freedom fighter goes, he was very steadfast in the things that he felt that he needed to do for his people. And, I was thinking about trying to remember how I felt the first time around seeing this. And I do remember being very impressed by him in terms of, he was a little bit stubborn in some ways, but yet, I mean, that's where the fortune cookie of compromise comes from. But
Mhm.
then again, he was unrelenting in the fact that these were his people. He was going to do what was best for them. He was very hard nosed, but yet he was also very tender in a lot of ways. When he picked up the little girl and talked about how they're the future, of their people, and even just the fact of them dancing and explaining that to Mace in terms of, this is how they deal with things and whatnot. He was just a very all around type of leader, I felt like in this.
Yeah, he's not unreasonable either. It's,
Mhm.
his point to Mace Windu is like, well, here's the thing: we are an independent, as good as an independent world. I mean, they had representation in the Senate under Orn Free Taa, but they didn't get assistance from the Republic when the Separatists invaded, and he was holding that against them. And his point is, if I help you get rid of this invading droid army, you know, he flat out asked Mace, is like, "Are you going to leave clones behind?" And
Mhm.
Mace is like, "Well, at first to keep the peace." And Cham's like, not buying that. It's like, yeah, okay, well then when are you going to get rid of them? And how long before I'm fighting you because you won't
Yeah.
leave? And there's now Mace obviously didn't lie about what was going on. He believed that this was a war for, peace in the galaxy and they had to defeat the Separatists. And when this was all over, things would go back to the old status quo. Well, we know that Cham
Mhm.
Syndulla called it here because the Republic just didn't pick up and leave when this was all done. The Republic became an empire and they took everything over, including Ryloth. And we get to see the after effects of that in both Rebels and the Bad Batch
Right.
when
And
when it
Lords
comes
of the
to
Sith too in the book.
right,
You remember?
right,
Yeah, because I mean, he ends up fighting stormtroopers, which is essentially an extension of.
that's a
So
good
that
point.
this particular quote is so prophetic in that way. It's
Uh-huh.
almost creepy.
Right. And as far as he's concerned, Orn Free Taa, who, if you don't know who that is the very rotund blue Twi'lek with the four Laku that is in the Senate.
And
Um,
several chins.
yeah, yeah. I was trying to be polite, but you're right. There's that. Um, And he views Orn Free Taa as basically this is a power play for him, and he's taking advantage of his position, and but they have to reach this compromise, which and then eventually they do. Orn Free Taa promises that the Republic won't leave soldiers there to take over the planet, and then in response, Cham Syndulla promises that he will relinquish his power. That he isn't an elected official here. He's just kind of organized people, but this is not a power play for him. So he gives Orn Free Taa what he wants out of that.
Right.
I don't know. It kind of feels like when you compare the two, Cham Syndulla still comes out on top with the noble intentions that they have.
Well, he does, because I think, for Orn Free Taa too, he doesn't really understand exactly what was happening on Ryloth. I mean, he did, but he didn't. And so
Right.
he was kind of in his nice little cushy Coruscant, life, and living this senatorial life. And I think he was trying to save face through a lot of this,
Uh-huh.
but realizing that, oh my gosh, these people really are dying. And the fact that, no one was caring about all of these deaths and all of this carnage. And so the compromise kind of had to happen, even for him to save face in a lot of ways. But you're right. I mean, Cham definitely came out on top as being the more noble, I think.
Yeah, and I think to summarize your point, you could just put it like this. If Orn Free Taa wants to maintain his power, he has to have a world he represents.
True.
And what the Separatists were doing, which was basically wiping out the planet and taking our treasure, then there was nothing for Orn Free Taa to represent and have any power. So there's that. It was funny watching the featurette for this episode, and one of the things that Dave Filoni was talking about that was this relationship between Orn Free Taa and Cham Syndulla, but then he was talking about the French accent, which was that this is something that George Lucas specifically requested, even though it wasn't what Dave Filoni did, but it was really just kind of a whim for George Lucas, and that's why Twi'leks have a French accent.
And George gets what George wants.
He's the boss, of course he does.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
But that's very interesting. And again, to that point too, I did notice that there was various pronunciations of Twi'lek and Twi'lek in here, because I think it was the tactical droid that pronounced it Twi'lek. And
Uh-huh.
then, you still get Twi'lek as well. And also the fact that I believe this is one of the very first times, if not the first time, that we get to truly see the male Twi'lek in terms of they have ears, not
Mhm.
ear cones like the females do, and the fact that their teeth are filed as a,
Right.
to show that. And we even get to see that later on in The Mandalorian, which I think is just fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Another key figure in this episode is Wat Tambor. And so, he's Amir Tambor is his official title. And this is not the first time we've seen him. He's shown up in other bits of this trilogy of episodes here. But this is where his greed absolutely comes to the forefront. And we've talked about this whole notion that the crawl for Revenge of the Sith says that there's war and there's heroes on both sides, and we have yet to really see the heroes of the Separatist Confederacy. But the idea, you would think, is that this is a world, it's got resources, this is a liberation thing, it's going to put pressure on the Republic. No. For Wat Tambor, this is all about how much money he can steal and how much art he can take off of all this. And he cares nothing for the people. Continues the tradition that we saw just in the past two episodes of using Twi'leks as living shields. When the Mace Windu and Cham Syndulla's forces are getting close to the capital of the Sioux, he tells them to put the people all out front so that the Jedi will be less likely to fire on them there. And he also is like, I'm not leaving until the two last transports from the south show up with the last bit of plunder from this planet.
And meanwhile, Dooku's like, we'll just destroy Ryloth. I don't care if you're there or not.
Yeah, that's
Ryloth. Take your chances.
Duke is like, it's like, you can't stand up to, you're no match for Mace Windu on this. And you need to retreat. but we still have something to gain. We have a political win to get here, which is that we will destroy the planet, bomb it into obliteration, and this will send a message to the rest of the galaxy of the cost of a Republic victory. That, yeah, sure, you can fight us, but look what happened to Ryloth there. But no more subtle thing, and kind of the point I was making at the top of this episode is that it's fun to go look at these episodes again after subsequent materials come out. That is a small line, but Dooku talking about how you're no match for Mace Windu. Well, I rewatched the Tales of the Jedi not too long ago, and there was that episode where Dooku and Mace Windu went on a mission together. And, it's just, there was that
Oh,
respect between those two.
yeah.
And even though Dooku did some things that kind of round foul the order at the end of it, Mace Windu was like, I will speak to the council on your behalf there. So
Mhm.
some just
Mhm.
respect left over after all that.
Oh gosh, that's a great, great point, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's a great tie-in.
Mhm. So, another big scene at the end of this is the attack on the capital of Lasso. And of course, it's the city that is separated from the mainland by a gigantic deep trench. And the only way across it is a plasma bridge, which the Separatists can retract and extend whenever they want. But they know that there's these two transports coming. And of course, Mace and a couple clones stow away inside one of them, get across the bridge. That's the plan, anyways. And then they're going to secure the bridge so that the rest of the clones and Cham Syndulla's men can get across. Of course, it doesn't go perfectly because once those two transports get onto the bridge, some battle droids come out to scan them and they are discovered. And this is where Mace Windu goes into absolute beast
Oh,
mode
yeah.
of all
Oh, yeah.
this. Hopping from stap to stap, force throws the two clones across the way, runs up the side of one of the transports as it's plummeting to the ravine, leaps across the rest of the way across the ravine, uses the force to pull those two out, grabs his saber, and then takes the fight right to the battle droid. It's such a great scene, and I love the fact that they show us that, and they like remove almost all the sound. It's
Yes.
almost just like Mace's heartbeat almost that you're hearing
Mhm.
there, and it's kind of an effect that they use to a lesser degree in the Last Jedi during the
Right.
Holo maneuver.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because I was gonna say something about that because we've always pointed out how the music sets the tone and how the music is just so amazing in the Clone Wars and Rebels and all of that, and that this is just strikingly just the opposite, but has just as much, if not more of an effect, which is brilliant.
hmm And there's an absolutely fantastic shot of when Mace jumps off the transport and he lands on the step, and it's him. The battle droids don't have eyes, but he's essentially looking eye to eye at the battle, and he's
Yes.
just scowling at that battle droid as he's
Uh-huh.
got his hand over the battle droid's hand, and he's using the control of the staff to get across there. And then, of course, he causes two of them to collide. Such a great, power scene for Windu here. It was just I can't say enough about it.
Definitely. Such an adrenaline rush.
Mhm. We even get a little bit of Anakin and Ahsoka in this.
Mhm.
Um, and a little went a very, very long way. They had Anakin reports in that they have conquered the space above Ryloth. And so, that's when Dooku knows it's all over. It's, they control space. There's nothing that can be done on this planet. And that's when they start making their moves to uh, bomb the villages and the like as they make their retreat, and Wat Tambor won't get out in time. But we get those shots of Anakin and Ahsoka taking out the bombers and then showing up just in time at the end of the episode to prevent the capital city from getting obliterated.
Definitely, and you could really hear almost, I don't want to say desperation in Anakin's voice, but it's one of the very few times when he contacted Mace earlier in the episode that he was like, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this." And Mace said, "Well, you're going to have to find a way. We'll do our best."
hmm
And at the end, then when they show up, I don't know if you've seen on Instagram, people have been taking Star Wars scenes from movies and saying if Star Wars was a comedy and introducing, the studio audience's reactions to things. But all I
Oh,
could
no.
think of was when I was watching this one again at the end when Anakin and Ahsoka start flying in there, the old sitcom where somebody walks onto set and then everybody's like, "Yeah!" And they start clapping. I thought, "Oh gosh, that would be like the perfect placement for that."
The one I've been seeing lately is Star Wars as a musical. Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah. Yep,
You
that's
know,
another
they're
one
doing the auto
too.
tune, and it's Anakin and Obi-Wan showing off at the end of the Revenge of the Sith. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's a
those
bunch
don't
of
always
those.
match up, but they're still entertaining.
Oh, I
Either
can't
one.
get enough of those. That's just they keep adding they use a lot of AI naturally, but they keep adding the
Mhm.
microphones and the guitars as they're
Yes,
going back and forth on those. It's a real trip. You got to check that out if you have an Instagram account.
for sure.
Okay, so a few oh no, before we get to that, the ending of this, we've got the clones and Cham Syndulla's men are victorious in the city, kind of marching in formation. A Republic cruiser lands and Orn Ta arrives. There's almost no dialogue that's going on at the moment, but this is a victory celebration that's basically watered down version of the end of the Phantom Menace.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
you've got an alliance of two different armies, the Republic and the Cham Syndulla's Twi'lek freedom fighters, basically
Mhm.
standing in for the Naboo and the Gungans. In this case, you have a Republic dignitary showing up, and there's celebrations going on around them.
Oh, that is such a substantial comparison, and you're right, because honestly, this victory on Ryloth is a very pivotal point in so
Hmm.
many things that are going on, and obviously it was so much more celebrated on Naboo for everything that was happening, but this is really no less of a victory, even though it's not necessarily mainstream, quote unquote, as compared
Hmm.
to the other one, but it's definitely a pivotal one.
Yeah, I mean, all it's missing is Palpatine, showing up and saying, "You've saved our people,"
Right.
and saying, telling Cham Syndulla, "We'll watch your career with great interest." So, um, yeah, but there's a few other Easter eggs that are in this. If you look at Commander Pons, that is the head clone working with Mace Windu. On the back of his helmet, it says in Arabic, "Some guys have all the luck." It was kind of fun.
Nice.
There's some really weird stuff on the screens behind Anakin's holo image when he's reporting on what's going on in space. One says, "Trouble on the horizon. Status report of advanced trooper recognition therapy syndrome evaluation team. Current phase of experiment proceeding satisfactorily according to projected schedule."
Huh?
What? Yeah. And then another
Very
scene,
interesting.
second most important spot after football.
That's behind Anakin?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to go back and find those.
Yeah.
I love
If you go to the
that.
episode guide, you can find it pretty clear. And then perhaps the best Easter egg of them all is that one of the treasures that Wat Tambor is stealing is none other than the Ark of the Covenant from Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yes, yes, I love that one. That one I did know about, and that one is classic indeed.
Yeah. Well, and there are Star Wars hieroglyphs in the resting place of the Ark in Raiders of the Lost Ark, so why not? Um,
Exactly.
okay.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, this is such a good episode. Which of these three episodes was your favorite?
Oh, goodness gracious. That's a hard one, honestly. Probably the last one, Innocence of Ryloth, mainly because
Yeah.
I love Waxer Boyle, the whole Numa thing, and it sets up so much. But I mean, obviously, with Sham in this episode, it's got such far reaching tendrils that just go so far beyond everything. But I would definitely have to go with the second one for myself. But what about you?
No, I think I'm with you. It's I hate to pick a favorite because this entire arc is so good. And
It
when we
is.
started off with the first episode and it, mainly dealing with Anakin and uh, Ahsoka and what they were going through, one of the things we talked about was how it's so great that they focus on different Jedi through
Hmm.
each episode of this arc. They all have different jobs to do, and it's not like it's the same people doing absolutely everything. There is a
Right.
coordinated operation going on here. Anakin and Ahsoka are in charge of phase one, Obi-Wan's in charge of phase two, and then Mace is in charge of phase three.
Hmm.
Now they're all clearly doing stuff while the others are taking care of their stuff, but it was a well designed story, and like you said, it's very pivotal and influential. and sets up a lot of things that are to come in Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well then I think that brings us to the end of our discussion of this episode of the Clone Wars. Thank you all for joining us here on Podcast Stardust as we went through Lyberty on Ryloth. We hope you've enjoyed it, and if you want to catch our future discussions of the Clone Wars, then hit that subscribe button on your podcatcher of choice, and those will get downloaded to you on Mondays when we cover them. Of course, we do take breaks when there's a new Star Wars show that comes out. But again, we'll be covering Clone Wars for quite a while going forward because we still have another 5 seasons that we haven't already done on this show.
Mm-hmm.
But if you want to catch more Podcast Stardust, then of course you can check out the back episodes on your podcatcher. But the entire catalog can be found over on retrozap.com. So, beyond that 100 or 200 episodes that you got, you can find all previous 848 episodes, as well as some other great shows covering everything from other pop culture references, animation, collecting, and the like. Lots to do over on RetroZap. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody what those social media contacts are one more time and the other places they can find us online?
Sure thing. So we are very easily found on Instagram and Facebook at Podcast Stardust. And you can always check out all of our Pinterest boards for everything Star Wars and everything from fashion and lifestyle to even ideas for doing your nails. So check that out. And then we also have our 2 YouTube outlets. So we have YouTube traditional as well as YouTube music. So head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. And those also support interactions and reviews as well. So we'd love to see it. And then we also have our TeePublic store with our 7 different show logo designs available on all kinds of things from home goods to apparel and everything in between. And if you pick something up, every one of those purchases does help to support the show. And we sure do appreciate that. So once again, the link to that is in our show notes.
All right. What do you got going on in cosplay?
All right. So as always, you can catch me on my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay. And I do, in fact, do 2 different versions of Hera Syndulla, as well as Ahsoka from the Clone Wars, and my 4th sister Inquisitor, my original concept Mandalorian, and some other things interspersed in there as well. I do Leia every once in a while and some other things. So got a few things coming up this spring. But until then, you can once again check out that Instagram at j.snipscosplay.
All right. So upcoming on the show on Wednesday, it is the second episode in our Revenge of the Sith series, looking at the next 10 to 15 minutes of the show. We got a great guest, so make sure you join us for that. And then on Friday, we end the week with another look at Star Wars news. So with that, just want to say thanks for listening to episode 849 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great week. And until next time, may the Force be